What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Sorry for not making videos for the last couple of days. My whole family and I were in the hospital with the disease you cannot say. But it's more or less good right now. Not fully recovered yet, but well, I'm able to perform at least basic human functions. As wise man once from my favorite TV show said, not great, not terrible. Let me know in the comments if you got which TV show is this. I'll take off the rest of the weekend to fully recover, but I still wanted to make at least shorter episode today and give you guys an update. I did make a community post on Wednesday and I read your guys' comments, so thank you so much for your support. I see it all. Thank you. Well, without further ado, let's begin. English subtitles are as always available, you can turn them on down below. These days there is one headline that stands out as a significant turning point. According to Reuters, new US sanctions have forced India and China, two biggest partners and friends of Putin, to halt their purchases of Russian oil transported by the so-called Shadow Fleet tankers. It signals the end of an era where the Kremlin could largely sneak its exports across the globe without facing the full force of international retribution. In the broader picture, this revelation ties into a deeper division that influences everything from global finance to personal dilemmas. It is also an example of how quick fixes end up costing sides long-term consequences. On one hand, you've got the desire to patch up a problem just enough to keep going another day. On the other, there is a daunting but necessary approach that demands careful planning and acceptance that not all emergencies can be resolved by a snapping of your fingers. Russia, under its current leadership, appears to have bet heavily on temporary patches for both economic and military problems, perhaps believing it can wage an endless war. Yet, no matter how high the paychecks go or how elaborate the export evasion schemes become, you cannot cheat the basic reality forever. And honestly, it was just a matter of time when this Russian-Indian-Chinese alliance falls apart. It is all about the money in the end. And when friendship becomes no longer profitable, even seemingly the closest partners turn on each other. Imagine, you are about to leave for your most important meeting of your life, and then your roof starts leaking. As it usually happens, the biggest inconveniences usually have the worst timings. Water is dripping, time is running out, and you have no chance to call a specialist. A bucket under the leak seems like a good temporary solution. And it's fine, for a moment. But keep delaying solving this problem for months and you will need a dozen buckets just to avoid a flood. Leave it for another year and your entire roof may collapse, becoming extremely expensive fix. On a personal level, short-term fixes like that can be lifesavers. But they can also sneak up on you later with bigger problems you never saw coming. At the level of government strategy, these short-term patches are not just about convenience or crisis management. They become the central philosophy. Take Russia's approach to filling its military ranks, for example. The simplest possible method is to offer massive, once unthinkable signing bonuses. 500,000 rubles at first, going all the way up to 4 million later, if people start turning down the initial offer. It certainly draws in volunteers, at first, especially in regions where life is cheap and few $1,000s is worth many times the local annual salary. But does it fix the long-term shortage of soldiers when the supposedly 3 days war turns into years? Well, not really. Because each pay bump will deliver fewer records than the last, and soon the cost of luring in new cannon fodder outpaces whatever resources you thought you had. It's like trying to buy loyalty at auction that never ends. Eventually, you run into bidders who want more than you will ever able to or be willing to pay. This same bucket under the leak mindset appears in how Russia has been marketing its oil and avoiding sanctions. A meticulously choreographed sequence of ship-to-ship transfers in international waters, a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore payments and back-alley deals. All of this puts together just to slip under the radar of Western regulators. For a while it worked, just until new sanctions landed and your biggest customers decided they are too exposed to American or European scrutiny, and so they obviously bailed. Suddenly, the entire operation you spent months perfecting disintegrates. You are left with tankers you cannot insure and oil you cannot sell in the usual volumes. That's the common trajectory of any temporary fix solution. It delivers immediate results, but it does not hold up under sustained pressure. Then there is the financial side. Some observers have pointed out that Russia's been funding a good portion of its war through an off-budget approach, cheap loans granted to defense contractors and manufacturers. The logic goes like this. No need to blow up the federal budget, no need to come up with official war taxes or cut social programs. Instead, let the defense industry borrow freely to crank out more tanks, drones or shells. Let's ignore the double-digit inflation that it brings for a second, because that's way too obvious to even discuss, and we've been talking about this several times in the past. On paper, it keeps the official economy looking stable, and the war machine keeps humming with minimal political backlash. Everyone seems happy, right? But what happens in a year or two when those loans are due? The war is not over, and these companies cannot repay a single cent. These are not socially beneficial companies. They do not sell goods to consumers, which in return boosts the economy. These tanks that they make are sent to Ukraine, just to be destroyed in the open field with not a single ruble of return. This is like investing your money in a company that you know will go bankrupt. So obviously, when the debt is due, these military-related companies that survived solely on Russian budget loans, they simply do not have the money to repay these loans back. You cannot hide this debt under the rug forever. Sooner or later, someone must start talking about the elephant in the room. Either the central government, which prints more money, or the banking system, which collapses under mountains of bad loans. That's precisely the kind of short-term solution that works only if you assume everything will be over in a matter of months. When that assumption fails, you are stuck with a bubble that has grown large enough to rock the entire economic foundation. You see this pattern again with the central bank's tactics. Hiking interest rates to 20% or more can hold inflation and maintain the ruble's value for a short while. But no real economy can thrive under perpetually astronomical borrowing costs. Companies beyond the defense sector shrink. Consumers cannot afford regular, personal, typical day-to-day loans, and new businesses never see the light of the day. That's not a recipe for a resilient society. It's a frantic measure to buy a little time with a lot of money. Many suspect that Putin and his inner circle started the invasion believing that the conflict would be triumphant blitzkrieg that would wrap up before most Russians had time to question anything. But as the months turned into years, each quick fix that was implemented starting early 2022 began aging like raw milk. Sanction-dodging schemes, as the notorious parallel import as called by Putin, looked brilliant when they were used the first time. But in 2025, they resemble a desperate hustle, involving way more steps, yielding far fewer results. The endless raising of soldier pay seemed feasible initially, but by now it highlights a deeper problem. People are not rushing to sign up, no matter the payout, because the war itself feels pointless and the risk of dying for nothing is alarmingly high. But the regime of Putin most likely have bought into its own PR, imagining that all these makeshift measures could be repeated indefinitely. Maybe they thought they had discovered some arcane loophole in the laws of global economics, something that would let them smuggle oil, finance endless expansions of the military, and keep the lights on in the Kremlin with no real blowback. Many people and countries in the past thought they can disobey the basic rules of economics, and so far all of them failed. Putin is one of the most recent ones who screams, "This time it is different." But the meltdown of the Shadow Fleet system shows how fragile this illusion really is. Major importers like India and China have perfectly legitimate oil sources available elsewhere. So why risk complicating their trade relations with the West just to help Russia avoid sanctions? Cheaper oil? Well, that was a reason at first. But now, with each step at avoiding sanctions costing more and more to the Russian leadership, the price of grey oil almost matches the legal one. Business is business, and shady deals are only appealing until they become more trouble than they are worth. And I can't imagine Putin being shocked with this simple truth either. He built around himself a system where people only care about money and status. The loyalty they have is to these materialistic things, and out of fear of death, of course. But once the risks become unbearable, this fake loyalty collapses faster than it was bought. History teaches us that large-scale crises typically arise not from a single cataclysm, but from a combination of smaller breakdowns. One single event is much easier to detect and prevent, but when there are hundreds if not thousands different things going all wrong at the same time, it is much easier to miss something until it becomes too big to handle. Think back to 2008 financial crisis. One part of the entire US market, subprime mortgages, imploded, and the ripple effects sank banks, pension funds, and major corporations. Not too many people even thought one of the biggest financial disasters could have been initiated from that specific area. All the experts and financial institutions had leaned too heavy on the assets they assumed was 100% guaranteed risk-free. Well, just to later find out that a gambling addict owning 4 homes worth $2 million with no proof of income is something definitely to be concerned about. Maybe he cannot pay these mortgages, who knows? Russia's economy likewise has been anchored to quick fixes of seemingly minor problems that were considered not big enough to sink the entire ship. But stack them together, the ballooning war debt, the suspicious shadow fleet, the artificially supported ruble, and the surging paychecks for reluctant recruits, and you get a shaky house of cards that's about to collapse at any wind because somebody opened the door too quickly. Such strategy of temporary fixes can continue for a while. More loans can be handed out to keep arms factories producing the equipment, and more secretive financial corridors can be carved out of the global system. But if the largest customers walk away, if the banks become allergic to all that risk, or if a war fatigue sets in across Russian society, the meltdown could be instantaneous. Personally, I don't think the collapse will happen within a couple of months, even though it can. In reality, it might take another couple of years, but there is no official countdown, obviously. But what is clear is that an economy built on illusions cannot sustain a prolonged conflict forever. One by one, friends will turn away from Putin, and once his existing allies see that there are no partners left to support Putin's losing cause, well, they will abandon him as well. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel. I will be recovering over the weekend, and then on Tuesday I will be very excited to see you all back, hopefully fully recovered and healthy. So for this, once again, please subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, PayPal subscriptions which allow you to see these videos in early access, and some uncensored footage from Ukraine, PayPal donations, everything. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Tuesday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway.